He survived the impossible. A human, against the laws of logic, defied the odds. He saved an entire alien colony, and yet the Empire branded him a spy. And now, trapped with the very enemy who condemned him, trust becomes his only weapon. But trust is a crime. Where are you watching from? Subscribe now to see the rest of the story unfold. The hangar smelled of ozone and regret. Elias Ward knelt beside the transport shuttle, his hands deep in its propulsion system, feeling the familiar hum of technology that had defined his life since the war ended. Around him, the crystalline towers of Avelian Prime stretched toward artificial stars, their blue light casting everything in cold precision. He didn't need to look up to know he was being watched. He'd been watched for 3 years. The sound of synchronized footsteps echoed through the hangar. Elias tightened a bolt with more force than necessary, his jaw clenching as the inspection team approached. 4 Thalari, their pearlescent skin catching the light, their 4 iris eyes scanning everything with mechanical efficiency. And her. Lyra Thullen stopped 3 meters away, datapad in hand, her expression as readable as vacuum. She wore the silver insignia of a rehabilitation supervisor, the rank humans learned to fear during the occupation. Engineer Ward. Her voice carried no inflection. Your work authorization expires in 14 minutes. Status report. Elias wiped grease from his hand, standing slowly. Generator coupling is stable. Thruster alignment at 97%. Your ships won't blow up today. You're welcome. One of her eyes twitched, almost imperceptibly. Almost. Humans cannot be trusted, she said, as if reciting doctrine. Your species specializes in deception. Elias felt the old anger rise, the same anger that had gotten him accused of espionage after he'd saved a Thalari colony during the war. The same anger that had cost him everything. He met her quad-iris gaze and smiled without warmth. And yet you trust us to repair your weapons. Funny how that works. The silence that followed felt like gravity shifting. Her 3 subordinates stiffened, hands moving toward stun batons, but Lyra raised one pale hand, stopping them. For a moment, something crossed her face. Doubt, maybe, or curiosity. Confidence measured in bolts and welds, she said finally. How very human. Before Elias could respond, the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the emergency klaxons screamed to life, bathing the hangar in red panic. The floor shuddered beneath them. Orbital generator failure, Lyra's datapad announced in synthetic calm. Sector 7 experiencing cascade shutdown. Lockdown protocol initiated. Elias looked up at the massive blast doors beginning their slow, inevitable descent. He had maybe 20 seconds before they sealed. His eyes met Lyra's. Trust me or don't, he said, already moving toward his toolkit. But if that generator goes critical, this whole station becomes a very expensive tombstone. The blast doors sang their closing song. Lyra's subordinates were already on the other side, pulled to safety by automatic protocols. She stood frozen, calculation warring with something else in those alien eyes. The doors slammed shut with a sound like the universe ending. Darkness. Then emergency lights, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Elias and Lyra stood on opposite sides of the sealed hangar, the air already tasting stale. Her datapad chirped. Rescue operations, 72 hours minimum. 3 days, locked together. Him and the woman who represented everything that had destroyed his life. Elias laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Well, he said into the amber dark, at least we'll have time to work on that trust issue. The first 12 hours were professional, clinical. They established protocols. Elias would handle mechanical systems. Lyra would manage communications and life support monitoring. They spoke only when necessary, their words efficient bullets in the stale air. By hour 15, the temperature had dropped 8 degrees. By hour 20, Elias noticed Lyra watching him as he worked, not with suspicion but with something else. Confusion, perhaps. He was rationing the emergency water supply, setting aside the larger portion for her without comment. It wasn't chivalry. It was just what you did. Why? She asked suddenly, breaking 2 hours of silence. Elias didn't look up from the panel he was rewiring. Why what? The water allocation. You gave yourself less. This contradicts survival logic. Does it? He finally met her eyes. Or does it just contradict Thalari logic? She stared at him for a long moment. On her datapad, he could see files open. His files. The report from the war. Subject Ward demonstrated tactical brilliance during the Epsilon station siege, personally evacuating 47 Thalari civilians at extreme personal risk. However, subsequent analysis suggests coordinated human intelligence operation. Recommendation: permanent surveillance. You saved them, Lyra said quietly. The colonists at Epsilon, my people. I know. And your own command accused you of using the rescue as cover for espionage. I know that too. Elias set down his tools. Funny thing about humans, we'll die for people who hate us and call it espionage. We're stupid like that. For the first time, he saw something crack in her composure. She looked down at her datapad, swiping through images. He caught a glimpse. Children. Human children. Playing in what looked like an Earth settlement. What are those? He asked. She closed the screen quickly, but not quickly enough. Anthropological research, required reading for rehabilitation supervisors, to understand the species we monitor. Ah, those kids in the photos, they look happy. Thalari children do not express joy so visibly. She paused. Your young seem chaotic, unpredictable. They're alive, Elias said. There's a difference. The console behind them suddenly screamed an alarm. Life support had just dropped to 40% capacity. The temperature readout plummeted another 5 degrees. They had maybe 6 hours before hypothermia became a real concern. Elias stood, assessing the situation with the cold calculation of someone who'd been through worse. We need to reach the backup generator. 3 levels down. The shaft access is through that maintenance tunnel. Lyra pulled up schematics. Impossible. That route requires 2-person security clearance. We'd need to work in perfect coordination. Then I guess you'll have to trust me. He held out his hand. Your command clearance. My mechanical access. Together, or we freeze. Your choice, Inspector. She stared at his outstretched hand like it was a weapon. In her culture, physical contact was reserved for family units only. To touch a stranger, especially a human, was to violate every social protocol she'd been raised to honor. The temperature dropped another degree. Her breath was starting to mist. Lyra took his hand. Her skin was cold. Her grip was iron. 72 hours, she said, as much to herself as to him. Rescue operations in 72 hours. Together, they moved toward the maintenance tunnel, her hand still in his. Neither of them mentioned that the temperature was dropping faster than predicted. Neither of them wanted to calculate what 72 hours might actually mean. They worked in the guts of the station for hours, Elias explaining human engineering philosophy while Lyra shared Thalari quantum mechanics. It was strange how easily the conversation flowed once they stopped trying to maintain professional distance. Necessity made unexpected partners. Your people over-engineer everything, Lyra observed, watching him jury-rig a connection with spare parts. 3 backup systems for every primary function. We don't trust the universe to play fair, Elias replied, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Thalari assume perfection, humans assume chaos and plan accordingly. Chaos. She said the word like she was tasting something foreign. Your species treats unpredictability as normal. We are unpredictable. That's the point. He finished the connection, and the lights flickered back to half strength. Done. We've got heat again. And as the temperature stabilized, Elias pulled out a protein bar from his emergency kit, broke it in half without thinking, and offered her the larger piece. Lyra stared at it. You continue to prioritize my survival over yours. Why? It's just a protein bar, not a philosophical statement. Everything with your species is a philosophical statement. But she took the food. They ate in silence for a while. Then Elias, exhausted and running on 30 hours without sleep, started humming. Old Earth song, something his father used to play. The melody escaped before he could stop it. Lyra's 4 eyes widened. What is that sound? Music. Sorry. Habit. He felt embarrassed, like he'd been caught doing something shameful. No, continue. I am curious. So he sang, quiet and off-key, about mountains and home and roads that led back to people you loved. His voice cracked on the high notes. He forgot half the words. It was objectively terrible. When he finished, Lyra was silent for a long moment. That was painfully off-pitch, she said finally, and yet you persisted through the entire composition, despite clear evidence of failure. Elias laughed. Yeah, that's pretty much humanity in a nutshell. Painfully off-pitch, but persistent. Something that might have been a smile crossed her face. Perhaps that explains much. They settled into the only heated section, a small maintenance alcove with barely enough room for 2 people. Elias immediately began arranging the thermal blankets, creating a barrier between them. What are you doing? Lyra asked. Making you a sleeping space. This corner holds heat better. I'll take the outer section. That area will drop below safe temperatures within 3 hours. I'll be fine. I've slept in worse. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer. When I was younger, I served as a junior liaison at the human detention facilities. There was a prisoner, an old man who sang to himself in his cell, songs like yours, broken and persistent. Elias waited. He was dying. Medical reports confirmed he had weeks at most, but he asked me for water. Not for himself, for the plants he was trying to grow in his cell window, contraband vegetation, against all protocols. What did you do? I gave him water, every day for 2 weeks. Her 4 eyes reflected the dim light, strangely. When my superiors discovered this, they called it a contamination of duty, an empathic deviation. They removed me from the program, reassigned me to rehabilitation supervision. This mission with you is my final evaluation, my last chance to prove I am still Thalari. The weight of that confession settled between them like a third presence. The old man, Elias said quietly. Did his plants grow? Yes, small white flowers. He died the day they bloomed. She looked away. He smiled. I did not understand why. Elias understood. He understood perfectly. Take the warm corner, Lyra, please. This time she didn't argue. As she settled into the makeshift bed, Elias moved toward the outer section. He was almost asleep when her voice cut through the darkness. Elias, there is something here. In the wall panel, it does not match station schematics. He was up instantly. Together they pried open the hidden compartment. Inside, pulsing with its own sickly light, was a device neither of them recognized. Hybrid technology. Human and Thalari engineering merged in ways that shouldn't be possible. An illegal energy core, the kind that had nearly started the last war. Their eyes met in the green glow of something that could destroy both their lives. This was planted, Lyra whispered. This was planted here deliberately. And with perfect, terrible timing, the core began transmitting. The core hummed its poisonous song between them, a secret that could end careers, lives, empires. Lyra's hand hovered over her datapad, the report screen already open. 1 tap. That's all it would take. Her duty, her redemption, her last chance to prove loyalty to the Thalari Empire. If I report this, she said, her voice hollow, they will execute you. Human found in proximity to illegal weapons technology. No trial, no questions. And if you don't report it, Elias countered, carefully disconnecting the core's power cells. "You'll be accused of collusion. They already think you're compromised. This would confirm every suspicion." Accurate assessment. Her fingers trembled over the datapad. "Logic dictates I preserve my career." "Yeah, logic's a real comfort when they space someone." She looked up sharply. "You speak as if you have accepted death." I saved 47 Thalari lives and got called a spy. I fixed your ships for 3 years while supervised like a criminal. I'm trapped in a station with someone whose job is to find reasons to condemn me." Elias laughed bitterly. "Death and I are on speaking terms." Lyra watched him work, his hands steady despite the conversation, dismantling a device that could kill them both, talking about his own execution like it was a maintenance schedule. The disconnect created something sharp in her chest, an emotion she'd been trained to suppress. "The prisoner I helped," she said suddenly. "The one with the flowers. Before he died, he told me something. He said humans have a word for people who let others suffer to save themselves. He said the word was survivor. Yeah, but the way he said it made it sound like an insult." "We do have other words," Elias said softly. "Better ones." "Such as?" "Human." The core flickered. Elias froze. "It's still transmitting. Not weapon signatures. Something else. Data packets on a rotating encryption." Lyra pulled up her scanner. "Coded transmissions. Multiple recipients. This is not a weapon. This is a communication node. Someone's using this station as a relay." Understanding dawned cold in Elias's gut. This was never about weapons. It's about information. And whoever finds us here, trapped with this thing, will assume we are the operatives. Lyra finished. "We have been framed." They stared at each other across the poisonous green light. Two people from different species, different worlds, caught in a trap designed by someone who understood exactly how the Empire worked. "I can disable it," Elias said finally. "Wipe the transmission logs, make it look like it was never here. But I'll need your command clearance codes. If I provide those codes, I am complicit. If this fails, then we both go down, together." He met her eyes. "You don't have to trust me, but you have to decide right now if you trust the Empire more than you trust your own judgment." She looked at him. Really looked. At the man who rationed water in his own favor, who gave up warmth without being asked, who sang terrible songs because silence was worse than imperfection, who called being human a better word than survivor. Her fingers moved on the datapad, not to report, to transfer. "My clearance codes, use them carefully. You just bet your life on me." "No," Lyra said quietly. "I bet my life on my judgment of you. The reports say you cannot be trusted, but reports said the prisoner was dangerous, and all he wanted was to see flowers bloom. Perhaps reports are not always accurate." They worked in synchronized silence, her codes and his hands dancing through the core's architecture. Elias had never seen Thalari technology respond to human intuition before, but Lyra guided him through it like a translator between languages. Together they were rewriting the narrative of the device, erasing evidence, creating plausible deniability. "Almost there," Elias muttered. "Just need to—" The core's alert system screamed, not a weapon alarm. Worse. A backup protocol, transmitting directly to Imperial Command. Automated, unstoppable. "Data packet sent," the mechanical voice announced. "Imperial Investigation Unit notified. Estimated arrival, 48 hours. They stared at the now silent core. They'd stopped the transmission, but not before the Empire knew something forbidden was here, not before investigation had been summoned. Lyra's datapad chirred with an incoming priority message. Her face went carefully blank as she read it. "The investigation team. They are requesting status reports from all personnel." She looked up at Elias. "They will want to know everything we found, everything we did. They will interrogate us separately." "And when our stories match," Elias said, They'll know we were working together." "Working together," Lyra repeated, "to conceal evidence, to protect each other." She laughed, a sound without humor. "How very human of me." "I'm sorry," Elias said, and meant it. "I'm so sorry. You tried to help me, and all I did was drag you down with me." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked them both. She reached across the dim space and took his hand. "You are not dragging me anywhere, Elias Ward. I chose this. For the first time in my life, I chose based on what I believed rather than what I was ordered to believe." Her grip tightened. "That choice may condemn us both, but it is mine, and I do not regret it." In the green glow of the compromised core, two hands held tight, human and Thalari, choosing each other over empire. The countdown to investigation had begun. 48 hours became 36 when they received the updated transmission. The investigation team was moving faster than protocol allowed. Someone wanted answers. Someone was very interested in what was happening in this sealed hangar. "They are not following standard procedures," Lyra observed, her four eyes scanning the constant stream of updates. Investigation teams normally allow 72 hours for preliminary assessment. They arrive in 36. This suggests predetermined conclusions. Elias was elbow-deep in the station's communication array, trying to find any record of who planted the core. Predetermined like, we already decided they're guilty? Precisely that. They are not coming to investigate. They are coming to collect evidence that confirms what they already believe. Great. Just great. He pulled back from the panel, frustration making his hands shake. "So, we've got a day and a half to prove we're innocent of crimes we didn't commit with evidence that says we did." "You saved 47 Thalari," Lyra said suddenly. "Tell me about it. The real story, not the report version." Elias went still. He'd spent 3 years not talking about Epsilon Station. 3 years letting the official narrative define him. The words came hard. It was supposed to be a simple extraction. Get the colonists to evacuation ships before the reactor went critical. Standard operation. He stared at his grease-stained hands. But my commanding officer, Captain Rivera, he'd been selling intelligence to separatist groups. Human separatists who wanted the colony to fail, who wanted Thalari deaths to restart the war. And you discovered this. During the evacuation, I found his encrypted messages on the command console. He was deliberately delaying rescue, letting the reactor count down, ensuring maximum casualties. So I locked him in the command center and ran the evacuation myself. Saved everyone. 47 Thalari, 3 human technicians. Got them all out with 6 minutes to spare. And Captain Rivera died when the reactor went. I didn't save him. I chose not to save him. Elias's voice cracked. I let my own commanding officer die, saved the people he tried to kill, and the Empire decided I was the spy. Because why would a human sacrifice another human for Thalari unless there was a deeper agenda, right? They couldn't accept that maybe I just thought letting people die was wrong. Lyra was silent for a long moment. You chose mercy over loyalty, and were punished for it. I chose what I could live with. Turns out I can't live with much. He laughed bitterly. Ironic, right? I saved your people and got accused of espionage. Now I'm trapped with you, and we're both going to be accused of espionage. I'm apparently very good at being the wrong kind of hero. No, Lyra said firmly. You are the right kind of hero in a system designed to punish righteousness. There is a difference. The console behind them flashed red. Emergency priority. Elias's heart sank as he read the message. Investigation team arrival, 12 hours. All personnel to surrender to custody immediately upon arrival. Resistance will be interpreted as confirmation of guilt. They moved the timeline again, Lyra whispered. Someone is pushing very hard to make sure we have no time to prepare a defense. Elias pulled up the Corps' transmission logs, the ones they hadn't completely wiped. His engineer's eye caught something. Lyra, look at this. The core wasn't just transmitting random data, it was sending specific files, personnel records, security clearances. Whose records? Yours and mine. Every detail of our backgrounds, our assignments, our psychological evaluations. Someone has been building a case file. The same someone who planted the core. Understanding dawned cold in her expression. We were selected. This was never random. Whoever is behind this wanted specifically you and me in this location. But why? Lyra's hands moved rapidly across her datapad, pulling up classified files with her family's high-level clearance. What she found made her go very still. My father? High Counselor Thalin. He is leading the investigation team. The words hung in the frozen air like an execution sentence. Your father is coming here to arrest you, to prove I am still Thalari, or to eliminate me if I am not. Her voice was hollow. This is not an investigation. This is my final test, and you are the proof of my failure. Elias felt something break inside him. Not for himself, for her. For the woman who'd given water to dying prisoners and been punished for kindness, who'd held his hand in the dark and called it choice. Then we run, he said. We have 12 hours. We find a way out of this hangar, get to a shuttle, disappear. There is no escaping this station, and even if there were, where would we go? I am Thalari. You are human. There is nowhere in the Empire we would both be safe. Then we make sure they don't have cause to execute us. We destroy the core, complete obliteration, no evidence. The logs were already sent. Destroying evidence would only confirm guilt. They were trapped. Perfectly, deliberately trapped, and the walls were closing in with a 12-hour countdown. Elias started laughing. It was either that or scream. You know what the really funny part is? I spent 3 years being watched, supervised, suspected, never trusted. And the moment someone actually trusts me, we're both doomed. Trust is apparently a very dangerous thing. Lyra looked at him with all 4 eyes, and in that gaze, he saw something that made the laughter die in his throat. Then let us be dangerous together, she said. Whatever comes in 12 hours, we face it as we have faced everything since the doors closed. Together, no matter what they call it. Her hand found his again. In the red warning light of incoming judgment, they held on. 2 people who'd been taught not to trust, trusting anyway, knowing it might kill them both. It was the most human thing Elias had ever seen a Thalari do. The blast doors opened exactly 12 hours later, pneumatic hiss announcing Judgment's arrival. High Counselor Thalin entered first, flanked by 8 Imperial guards in full combat armor. He was tall even for a Thalari, his pearlescent skin marked with the silver lines of age and authority. His 4 eyes swept the hangar with mechanical precision before landing on his daughter. Elias had expected many things: rage, disappointment, cold fury. He had not expected the counselor to look sad. Lyra, Thalin said, his voice carrying the weight of empires. My daughter, my greatest failure. Lyra stood straight, her hand still holding Elias's. She had not let go when the doors opened, had not stepped away when the guards raised their weapons. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Father, I did not fail. I chose. Choice. The counselor said the word like a diagnosis. Always your weakness. Your mother said I was too lenient with you, that I allowed human philosophy to contaminate your education. She was correct. Elias felt Lyra's grip tighten imperceptibly. There was a story there, in that grip, a history of pressure and expectation and slow suffocation by duty. The counselor's gaze shifted to Elias. Engineer Ward, the human who saves Thalari and is called a traitor, the human who corrupts my daughter with sentiment and trust. I have read much about you. Funny, Elias said, keeping his voice level despite his racing heart. I've read nothing about you. Apparently humans aren't trusted with files on high counselors. Security risk. You have been a security risk since Epsilon Station. Your actions there defied logical explanation. A human sacrificing a human for Thalari lives. Anomalous. Suspicious. Or maybe just decent. Elias couldn't help himself. He was going to die anyway. Might as well die honest. Maybe your logic has a blind spot the size of basic compassion. The guards moved forward. Thalen stopped them with a raised hand. Tell me, engineer, the illegal core found in this hangar, the one you and my daughter conspired to conceal, who placed it there? We didn't conceal it. We tried to... I asked who placed it. Elias and Lyra exchanged glances. They'd been over this 100 times in the last 12 hours, looking for answers in fragmentary data logs and coded transmissions. They had theories, no proof. We don't know, Lyra said, but we know it was planted deliberately. The timing, the location, the specific selection of personnel. This was orchestrated. Orchestrated. Thalen walked slowly around them, his robes whispering against the deck. By whom? For what purpose? To frame us, Elias said. To manufacture evidence of human Thalari cooperation on illegal weapons. To justify stricter controls, harsher oversight. Someone benefits from making humans look like security threats and Thalari like traitors. The counselor stopped walking. For a long moment he was silent. You are partially correct, he said finally. The core was planted. By me. The world stopped. Lyra's hand went rigid in Elias's. Father, what are you saying? This was a test, daughter. Your final evaluation. I needed to know if your contamination was complete. If you would choose duty or sentiment when forced to decide. He turned to face her fully. The core was not a weapon. It was a diagnostic tool. Every action you took, every choice was monitored, recorded, analyzed. You set me up. Lyra's voice was hollow. You engineered my failure. I gave you every opportunity to succeed. You merely needed to report the core, follow protocol, prioritize empire over individual. You failed to do any of these things. Thalen's expression was carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. You held his hand, publicly, in front of Imperial guards. You announced solidarity with a suspected human operative. You chose trust over doctrine. Yes, Lyra said, and her voice was steel. I did, and I would do it again. The counselor looked at his daughter for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Your mother chose duty, always. When I questioned an execution order, when I suggested more humane detention facilities, when I argued for peace instead of occupation, she chose empire, she chose correctly, she was promoted. I was taught to choose correctly too. He paused. You have her face, but you have my weakness. You feel too much. Feeling is not weakness, Lyra said. In the Empire it is. Thalen gestured to the guards. Take them both. Separate detention, formal charges, conspiracy, evidence tampering, compromised loyalty, sentence pending full tribunal review. As the guards moved forward, Elias saw it. The tiny hesitation in the counselor's posture. The way his gaze lingered on Lyra's face. The slight tremor in his hand before he clenched it. This man didn't want to do this, but the Empire required it. And he, like his daughter, had been taught to choose duty over feeling. Unlike his daughter, he'd never learned to stop. Dad. Lyra's voice cracked on the word, a word Thalari rarely used. When did you decide feeling was wrong? Thalen's expression fractured for just a moment, just long enough for Elias to see the man beneath the counselor, the father beneath the Empire. The day your mother left me for choosing you over protocol, she said I contaminated you with human sentiment. She was right. I should have been stronger. He turned away. I should have chosen correctly, as you should have. The guards separated them. Elias fought, but stun batons made fighting pointless. As they dragged him toward the transport, he saw Lyra standing in the center of the hangar, her father 10 meters away, an infinite distance between them. I am sorry, daughter, Thalen said, his back still turned. "I am sorry, you are mine." The last thing Elias saw before the stun field took him was Lyra's face. Not crying. Thalari didn't cry, but her eyes held something that transcended species, a particular kind of heartbreak that came from realizing your parents' love was real but insufficient, present but too afraid to act. The transport doors closed. Darkness took him. When Elias woke, he was in a cell, alone, waiting for the tribunal that would decide how he died. And somewhere in another cell, he knew Lyra was waiting too. Both of them paying the price for choosing to feel in an empire that called feelings weakness. Both of them learning that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is simply care. The tribunal convened 6 days later in the Grand Council chamber, beneath the crystalline towers of Avelion Prime. Elias was brought in first, shackled and exhausted, to face a panel of 9 Thalari judges. The charges were read in clinical monotone: conspiracy, evidence tampering, corrupting an imperial officer. He barely listened. His mind was still in that hangar, still feeling Lyra's hand in his, wondering if she'd been processed through similar charges, wondering if she regretted choosing him. The doors opened. Lyra entered, similarly bound. Their eyes met across the vast chamber. In that moment, every question Elias had been asking himself was answered. She didn't regret anything. Her eyes said so. High Counselor Thalen stood as primary witness. He testified with perfect precision. The planted core, the surveillance data, every choice Lyra had made, every protocol she'd violated, every moment she'd chosen Elias over Empire. The evidence was damning because it was accurate. She'd done everything they accused her of. "And in your professional assessment," the head judge asked, "does your daughter represent a security risk to the Empire?" Thalen was silent for a long moment. "She represents a philosophical risk, a challenge to our foundational principles. She has demonstrated that Thalari can be compromised by human sentiment, that our superiority of logic can be contaminated by emotion, that our discipline can be broken by something as simple as trust." "Then you recommend permanent separation, elimination of contaminated personnel?" Another pause. "Longer this time. I recommend what logic requires," Thalen said finally, and his voice was empty. "What the Empire requires, yes." The judgment was swift. Both defendants guilty. Sentence: elimination by vacuum exposure. Public execution to demonstrate the cost of cross-species cooperation. They would be transported to Orbital Station 7 and spaced together, a symbolic statement about the fate of those who crossed Imperial boundaries. Elias felt numb. He'd known this was coming, had known since the doors first closed them in the hangar. Some traps you can't escape because they're built by people who understand you too well. The counselor had understood his daughter perfectly, had known exactly how to prove her guilty. The guards came to separate them for transport. Final protocols. Last moments before the machinery of justice consumed them both. Elias looked at Lyra one more time. She was staring straight ahead, her face the perfect mask of Thalari composure, but her hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough for him to see. He wanted to say something, wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that choosing kindness was never the wrong choice even when it killed you, that her father was wrong, that feeling wasn't weakness, that she'd made him believe in humanity again at the exact moment he'd forgotten why it mattered. But the guards were between them, weapons ready, and words seemed insufficient anyway. The transport shuttle waited in the loading bay. 20 soldiers lined the corridor, witnesses to the March of the Condemned, standard protocol, maximum visibility. The Empire wanted this scene, wanted the message clear. Elias walked because fighting was pointless. His hands were still bound, his fate already sealed. He focused on breathing, on existing for whatever minutes remained. He heard her footsteps behind him, Lyra being led by her own escort. Her father stood at the bay entrance watching, witnessing what his loyalty to Empire required. His face was stone, his eyes were not. They reached the shuttle ramp. The guard pushed Elias toward the entrance. He stumbled, caught himself, turned to see Lyra one last time before she broke from her escort. 3 guards grabbed for her. She was faster, trained in combat even if she'd never used those skills against her own people. She moved through them like water, not fighting, just moving. Toward Elias, toward the one thing the Empire said she shouldn't reach. She reached him as the guards recovered, weapons charging. She was breathing hard. Her 4 eyes were bright with something that might have been fear or might have been freedom. Her hands found his despite the shackles, and she held on. The loading bay went silent. 20 soldiers, 9 guards, 1 high counselor, all frozen by the sight of a Thalari inspector holding a human engineer's bound hands, like they were the last solid thing in a collapsing universe. "Inspector Thalin," the guard captain said carefully, "release the prisoner, now." Lyra didn't move. Her grip tightened. "Lyra," Thalin said, and for the first time his voice cracked. "Daughter, do not do this." And she looked at her father across the loading bay. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner, every witness, every recording device. "You said humans cannot be trusted. You said they corrupt with sentiment and compromise with emotion. You said my choice to trust Engineer Ward was contamination." She turned her gaze to Elias, and in it, he saw everything they'd never said in that hangar. Everything they'd never have time to say. "You were right. I am contaminated. I am compromised. I have been corrupted by trust in someone the Empire says I should fear." "Then release him," Thalin said desperately. "Prove your loyalty. There is still time. You can still be saved." "No, Father." Lyra's voice was gentle, final. "I cannot be saved from feeling, and I do not wish to be." She turned to the assembled guards, the witnesses, the judges watching via remote feed. "If trusting someone is a crime, then I am guilty. If holding the hand of someone who showed me kindness is contamination, then I am contaminated. If choosing to believe in someone the reports say I should fear is treason, then I am a traitor." The guards moved forward, weapons raised. The captain's voice was hard. "Final warning, release the prisoner and surrender." Elias tried to pull his hands away, tried to save her from herself. She held tighter. Her eyes met his. "I told you, humans cannot be trusted," she said softly, just for him. "But I never told you why that terrifies the Empire. It is because when humans trust, they make it impossible not to trust them back. That is your revolution. That is your weapon. You turn logic into feeling by simply being worth feeling for." She turned back to the guards, raised her voice so everyone could hear. "If trusting in someone is a crime, then begin my judgment now. But know this, I have never been more certain of any choice in my life. This human showed me more honor in 3 days than the Empire has shown me in 30 years. If you execute him, you execute the best of what we could become. And if that makes me a traitor, then let me be a traitor who chose truth over doctrine." The silence that followed was absolute. Elias felt tears on his face and didn't care. Felt her hand shaking and held tighter despite the shackles. Felt something break and rebuild in the space between them. The guard captain looked to High Counselor Thalin, waiting for orders, waiting for the father to condemn his daughter, waiting for Empire to devour its own. Thalin stood frozen, looking at Lyra holding Elias, seeing what he'd taught her to suppress, seeing what she'd become without his teaching, seeing his daughter choosing love over logic and breaking every rule he'd spent his life upholding. "Take them," he whispered. "Both of them. Alliance contamination. Sentence stands." The guards moved forward, pulled them apart. Lyra didn't fight, didn't resist. She'd made her statement, held her ground, chosen her truth. As they dragged her toward the shuttle, she looked back once. Her eyes found Elias's. "I do not regret," she said. "No matter what comes, I do not regret you." "Lyra!" Elias called out as they pushed him through the door. Lyra, I... The shuttle doors closed, cutting off words, sealing fate. In the loading bay, High Counselor Thalen stood alone, watching the transport lift toward orbit, toward the execution platform, toward the moment when his logic would kill his daughter's heart. And for the first time in 30 years, he wept, silently, efficiently, the Thal'ari way, feeling everything, doing nothing. The Empire's perfect sun. The holding cell on Orbital Station 7 was small, designed for one. They'd put both Elias and Lyra in it anyway. A final cruelty, or maybe mercy. Let the condemned spend their last hours together. Let them contemplate the cost of their choice. 18 hours until execution. The digital countdown on the wall made sure they knew. Elias sat against the cold metal wall, his head in his hands. Lyra stood by the small viewport, staring out at the stars. They'd been silent for 3 hours. Words felt insufficient. What do you say to someone when your shared tomorrow is measured in countdown clocks? "You should have let me go," Elias said finally. "In the loading bay. You could have saved yourself." "No." Lyra didn't turn from the viewport. "I could have preserved my life. That is different from saving myself. Semantics when you're about to die. Philosophy when you're about to live." She turned to face him, and her expression was strange. Peaceful. "For the first time, Elias, I was alive, in that loading bay, holding your hand in front of everyone who told me not to, choosing you over every rule I'd been taught. That was the first moment I truly existed instead of just complying." Elias stood, crossing the small space between them. "You're going to die for existing. How's that worth it?" "Because I got to exist at all." She reached out, her fingers brushing his face. Thal'ari didn't touch faces. It was the most intimate gesture in their culture. "Tell me about Earth, about the mountains you sang about home." So, he told her, about Colorado peaks and autumn leaves and the way snow sounded when it was new, about his father teaching him to fix engines in their garage, his mother's terrible coffee that he'd drink anyway because she made it, about hiking trails and terrible jokes and the particular quality of light through pine trees. She told him about Thal'ari cities before the Empire standardized them, about crystal gardens where her grandmother took her as a child, about the old ways, before efficiency became doctrine, about songs her people used to sing before silence became policy. They talked until their voices were raw, building entire worlds between them, with nothing but words and 18 hours. No past, no future, just this moment, just each other. "I accessed the core's data logs," Lyra said suddenly, pulling up a concealed data pad she'd somehow kept through processing. "Before they took me, I wanted to understand what the device really was, what it was truly transmitting. And it was not a communication relay, not for espionage. The core was broadcasting memory fragments, emotional imprints, human emotional patterns encoded into Thal'ari neural frequency. Someone was using it to translate feelings." Elias stared at her. "Translate feelings? Why?" "Because the Empire fears them. Because if Thal'ari could understand human emotion, truly understand it, our entire social structure would collapse. Discipline requires emotional suppression. The Empire requires discipline. Therefore, understanding emotion is existential threat." Someone was trying to teach Thal'ari to feel. Someone was trying to revolutionize us, using human memory, human emotion, as the catalyst. She looked at him with all four eyes. "And they chose you specifically, your memories, your emotional patterns from Epsilon Station. The core was broadcasting your choice to save Thal'ari lives despite the personal cost. Your willingness to sacrifice for strangers. My humanity," Elias finished. "They were using me as a transmission of humanity." "Yes. And when my father found out, when the Empire realized what was happening, they had to stop it. Had to prove that human emotion was contamination, not evolution. Had to make your sacrifice look like conspiracy. She gripped his hands. We were never the targets, Elias. We were the demonstration, the proof that human sentiment corrupts, that cooperation destroys, that trust is weakness. But we chose each other anyway. We chose each other anyway, she agreed, and now the Empire will kill us to make sure that choice doesn't inspire others. They stood in silence, processing the enormity of it. They'd been pawns in a larger game, their connection weaponized, their trust used as evidence against trust itself. The countdown read 16 hours. I want to survive, Lyra said quietly. Not because I fear death, but because I want more time to feel this. Whatever this is between us, however impossible. Then we survive, Elias said. We find a way. There is no way. The execution chamber is automated. Vacuum exposure, no override, no escape. But Elias was thinking, his engineer's mind working through problems the way he'd been trained. The core, you still have access to its frequency? Limited access. Why? Because it was designed to broadcast emotion, to translate human patterns into Thalari frequency. What if we reversed it? His words came faster now, excitement and desperation mixing. What if we used it to broadcast not just emotion, but action? A pulse strong enough to disrupt station systems, create a window. That would require reactivating the core, here, in this cell, with no tools and no access to its physical hardware. Do you still have your command codes? They have not been revoked. They assume I am too broken to use them. Then they assume wrong. Elias pulled her close, his forehead touching hers. I spent 3 years fixing Thalari technology with human improvisation. You spent your life understanding systems the Empire thought you couldn't question. Together, we're the most dangerous thing in this station. An engineer and a traitor. So, a human and a Thalari who chose to trust each other. He smiled, and it was fierce. Let's show them why that terrified them so much. They worked through the night, using Lyra's datapad to access the core's remote functions, Elias's knowledge of Imperial systems to find vulnerabilities. It was improvisation, chaos, the kind of planning that made Thalari logic, recoil, and human intuition sing. The countdown read 6 hours when they finished. This will work for approximately 90 seconds, Lyra said. The pulse will disable communications and life support systems, including in this cell. We will have 90 seconds to reach the emergency pods before backup systems engage. And if we don't make it, then we die together instead of separately. I consider that an improvement. Elias laughed. Actually laughed. She was making jokes. At the end of the universe, she was making jokes. You've learned humor. That's definitely my corrupting influence. The worst corruption, she agreed and smiled. Actually smiled. I blame you entirely. They held each other as the countdown ticked toward 0. Toward the moment when they'd activate the pulse. Toward their last, desperate gamble. Elias, Lyra said into his shoulder, if this fails, if we do not survive, I want you to know something. What? Humans cannot be trusted to follow rules, cannot be trusted to prioritize logic over feeling, cannot be trusted to choose survival over compassion. She pulled back, her eyes finding his. But you can be trusted to be exactly who you are, and that is the most valuable trust in the universe. The countdown reached 1 hour. They activated the pulse, and the station screamed. The pulse hit the station like an electromagnetic heart attack. Every system connected to the Imperial network convulsed. Lights flickered into darkness. Life support gasped and died. Communication arrays shrieked static into the void. For 90 seconds, Orbital Station 7 was deaf, blind, and choking. The cell door's magnetic lock failed. Elias and Lyra ran. The corridor was chaos. Emergency lighting painted everything in red panic. Alarms screamed warnings no one could coordinate. Other prisoners, sensing opportunity, broke free from failing containment. Guards scrambled to restore order without communication. It was beautiful, perfect chaos, the kind only humans truly understood. "Emergency pods!" Lyra gasped, pulling him left through a maintenance passage. "Section 4, 60 seconds remaining." As they ran through smoke and darkness, Lyra's memory of station layout and Elias's ability to interpret failing systems guiding them. Behind them, the station was already recovering. Backup systems engaging, security protocols rebooting. Their window was closing. They burst into the pod bay with 30 seconds left. 6 escape pods lined the wall, their green lights indicating readiness. Elias lunged for the nearest one, keying the activation sequence. The pod's light turned red. Locked. Imperial override. "They are recovering faster than predicted," Lyra said, her hands flying over the control panel. "They are locking down all escape routes. They know what we are attempting." 20 seconds. Elias tried the next pod. Red. The next. Red. All of them. Locked down systematically by a security system that was learning from their tactic. Adapting. The Empire's famous efficiency asserting itself even in crisis. "They blocked the pods," Elias said, desperation creeping in. "All of them. We are trapped." 15 seconds. Lyra's 4 eyes scanned the bay, her mind working with the cold calculation she'd been trained for. Then she saw it, the maintenance access panel, the one that led to the station's external docking clamps. Manual release. No override possible, but also no life support, no shielding, certain death. Unless... Her hand found the core, still pulsing with residual energy in her data pad, still broadcasting, still translating human emotion into Thalari frequency. One more pulse, one more burst, strong enough to destabilize the magnetic containment on the docking clamps, strong enough to create an ejection field, strong enough to launch one escape pod, if someone was in the right position, if someone was willing to be the conductor instead of the passenger. 10 seconds. "Elias," Lyra said, her voice suddenly calm. "Get in pod 3. "What?" "It is locked, Get in pod 3, now. Trust me." He looked at her, saw the plan forming in her eyes, saw what she was calculating, what she was choosing. "No," he said. "No, Lyra, do not. I told you humans cannot be trusted." She smiled, and it was radiant. "I never told you that I learned why. You trust even when the universe screams it is foolish. You hold on even when letting go would save you. You believe in people who do not believe in themselves." 5 seconds. She pushed him, hard, toward pod 3. His engineer's instinct made him stumble backward into the pod's entrance. She was right behind him, her hands on his chest, forcing him deeper inside. "Lyra, stop, we can both." "No." She keyed something on her data pad. The core's energy signature spiked. "We cannot, but you can, and I can make sure you do." The pod door began closing. Elias lunged forward, trying to reach her. She stepped back, just beyond his reach, her hand on the manual override. "Lyra, please." He was begging now, not caring. "Please do not do this. Come with me. We find another way. I am coming with you." She held up the datapad, showing him the core's new programming. The pulse she'd configured. "This will broadcast at the moment of detonation. Every emotion, every memory, every feeling you showed me. It will spread through the Imperial network. Your humanity, your trust, your impossible, beautiful, stubborn belief that people are worth saving. That will be my gift to the Empire that tried to kill us. That will be how I survive." The pod door was closing. 3 seconds. "You are teaching them to feel," Elias realized. "You are making them understand. I am making them see what they destroyed when they called trust contamination." Her eyes held his. "You saved 47 Thalari. Now I save the only human who ever made me believe saving mattered." 2 seconds. "I said humans cannot be trusted." Her voice cracked. "Finally, Because you trust even when the universe demands surrender. You love even when love is called weakness. You hold hands with people the Empire says you should fear. She placed her hand on the pod's closing door, her palm pressed against the transparent panel. Elias's hand found the same spot from inside, separated by polymer, connected by everything that mattered. "Now I understand," she whispered. "That is not corruption. That is revolution." 1 second. "Now I trust you with my life." The pod door sealed. The core detonated. Lyra's entire being became the conductor, channeling the electromagnetic pulse through her nervous system, through her command codes, through every protocol she'd ever learned. The magnetic clamp screamed and released. The ejection field erupted. Elias's pod launched into space like a bullet from a gun, escape trajectory already calculated, Lyra's final gift carrying him toward the shipping lanes where rescue was possible. Behind him, through the pod's rear viewer, he saw the station. Saw the explosion bloom where the docking bay had been. Saw debris and energy painting the void in colors that shouldn't exist. Saw her, for one impossible moment, silhouetted against the detonation. Her hand still raised, still pressed against where his hand had been, still holding on. The blast wave caught her. The void claimed her. The universe took her the way it took all beautiful, impossible things. Too quickly, too finally, Elias screamed her name into the pod's recycled air, screamed until his voice broke, until emergency systems sedated him for his own safety, until consciousness became optional and grief demanded nothing. The pod drifted through vacuum, beacon broadcasting, rescue inevitable. Inside, a human engineer slept fitfully, his hand pressed against the polymer where hers had been, where he swore he could still feel warmth, still feel pressure, still feel her saying through touch what words had never managed. "I choose you. I choose this. I choose to believe." On Orbital Station 7, the explosion had destroyed the docking bay but left the station intact. Emergency crews worked to restore function. Security analyzed what happened. High Counselor Thailand stood in the observation deck, looking at the debris field where his daughter had made her final choice. He held a data pad. The Corps' last transmission had reached him first. Every broadcast, every emotion, every impossible moment Elias Ward had shared with Lyra Thalen. 3 days in a hangar, 3 days of a human teaching a Thalari that feeling wasn't failure. The data was spreading, through command networks, through administrative databases, through every connected system in the Empire. Millions of Thalari experiencing human emotion for the first time. Understanding what they'd suppressed, seeing what they'd called weakness was actually strength. Thalen watched the data spread like wildfire across networks, watched his carefully controlled empire begin to fracture along emotional fault lines, watched his daughter's final act of rebellion teach an empire to feel. "Lyra," he whispered to the debris field, to the daughter he'd failed to save. "You were always stronger than me. I just could not admit it." In the void, Elias's pod drifted toward rescue, his hand still pressed against the polymer, his heart still breaking in the particular way that comes from loving someone brave enough to choose death over letting you face it alone. And somewhere in the space between them, in the electromagnetic patterns spreading through Imperial networks, Lyra Thalen's gift continued to teach, continued to spread, continued to prove that trust, however impossible, however dangerous, was the most human thing in the universe, and that humans made that trust contagious. 1 year later, agricultural colony Tau 9, edge of Imperial space. Elias Ward woke to synthetic sunlight and the smell of Earth. Real Earth, imported at great expense from Terra, because the colony director believed humans needed soil from home to truly heal. She might have been right. Elias had spent a year with his hands in dirt, growing things that didn't grow naturally on this world, coaxing life from alien ground through sheer stubborn persistence. The Empire had declared the incident an unfortunate malfunction. Inspector Lyra Thalen, tragic casualty of system failure. Engineer Elias Ward, rescued and relocated, no trial, no execution. Just bureaucratic efficiency sweeping inconvenient truths under official narratives. They'd let him live, because killing him would have required explaining why. And the Empire had become very bad at explanations since Lyra's broadcast. Elias walked through the fields as dawn broke, checking irrigation systems and crop growth. His hands knew this work now, mechanical precision applied to biological chaos, finding rhythm in the daily routine of keeping things alive. But every night, when the wind moved through the communication arrays that ring the colony, he felt it. A gentle pressure on his right hand, a warmth that had no source, an electric field that shouldn't exist but did anyway. He'd measured it, documented it, analyzed it with every tool available. The field matched exactly the electromagnetic signature of Thalari neural patterns, specifically Lyra's neural patterns, as if some part of her had imprinted on him during those final seconds, as if her last act of will had been to make sure he'd never forget what they'd been together. Science said it was impossible. Grief-induced hallucination, phantom sensations. His mind creating comfort where none existed. But Elias had stopped trusting what science said about impossible things. He'd learned better. The tablet on his workbench chirped. Incoming transmission. He almost ignored it. Colony life meant limited contact with the broader empire. He preferred it that way. Fewer reminders of what he'd lost. But something made him check. Engineering instinct. The sense that some signals matter more than others. The transmission was old, encrypted, bouncing through relay stations for months, deliberately obscured. The decryption key was a single word. Ward. Elias's hands shook as he opened it. The file contained 3 items. First, a personnel report. High Counselor Thalin had resigned from the Imperial Council 3 months ago. Reason given: philosophical differences with current policy. He'd taken a position as cultural liaison to human settlements, studying human communities, learning what his daughter had tried to teach him. Second, an analysis document. Lyra's broadcast had reached 4 billion Thalari before it was contained. Of those, 43% reported experiencing emotions they'd suppressed. 15% requested counseling for processing feelings. 8% had filed formal complaints about the emotional suppression doctrine. The Empire was fracturing, not into war, into awakening. Third, an audio file, no video, just sound. The encryption dated it to moments before Lyra's death. Her final recording. Elias's finger hovered over the play button. He wasn't sure he could handle her voice, wasn't sure he was strong enough. He played it anyway. Elias, her voice, steady, calm, certain. If you are hearing this, then my calculations were correct and you survived. Good, that was the point. I have approximately 90 seconds before the pulse detonates, and I want to use them efficiently. He heard her breathing, heard the background chaos of the dying station, heard her choosing each word carefully. Humans cannot be trusted. I said this to you in the hangar. I believed it because the Empire taught me to believe it. Because trusting humans meant accepting that everything I'd been taught was wrong, that efficiency was not superior to compassion, that logic was not better than feeling, that my life of discipline was actually a life of death. A pause. The sound of her fingers on keys. Programming. Even in her final moments. Working. But I learned something in those 3 days with you. Humans cannot be trusted to follow rules that contradict their nature. Cannot be trusted to choose survival over integrity. Cannot be trusted to abandon people just because logic suggests it. And that is why you are dangerous to empires. That is why my father feared you. That is why they tried to prove trust was contamination. Her voice grew softer, more personal. You cannot be trusted to give up, even when the universe demands surrender. You cannot be trusted to stop caring, even when caring destroys you. You cannot be trusted to hate people who hate you. You held my hand, Elias, when soldiers pointed weapons, when your own death was guaranteed. You held my hand, and in doing so you made me understand what my people lost when we chose to stop feeling. Another pause. Longer. He heard her breathing change, heard emotion breaking through Thal'ari control. I am not sacrificing myself for you. I am choosing to live the only way that matters, with trust, with feeling, with the impossible, beautiful, dangerous belief that people are worth the cost of caring for them. You taught me that. In 3 days, you taught me what 30 years of empire education could not. You taught me to be alive instead of just functional. The station alarms grew louder in the background. Time running out. My broadcast will spread. Your emotions, your memories, your stubborn human insistence on trust despite evidence. It will contaminate my people. It will make them question. It will make them feel. And the empire will change because of it. Not through war, through something more dangerous, through the contagious realization that we have been living wrong. Her voice steadied. Final words, final gift. So when you feel my touch, know it is real. When you remember me holding your hand, know it mattered. When you wonder if trust was worth it, know that trust is the only thing that was ever worth anything. You cannot be trusted to forget that. And I cannot be trusted to let you face this universe without knowing you were seen. You were valued. You were loved by someone who learned what love meant because of you. Static. The sound of the pulse building. The moment arriving. Thank you for teaching me to feel, Elias Ward. Thank you for showing me that being human is not about species. It is about choosing each other despite every reason not to. It is about trust when trust is called treason. It is about love when love is called contamination. The final seconds, her last breath audible, her last words deliberate. Humans cannot be trusted because you trust even when the universe says stop. And that trust makes trust possible for everyone who witnesses it. That is your revolution. That is your gift. That is why, in the end, humanity will always terrify those who confuse control with strength. Silence. Then barely whispered, I am not afraid. I am grateful. Tell them. Tell everyone. Tell the Empire. Tell the universe. Tell them that Lyra Thalen learned to trust, and it killed her, and she would do it again. And that is the most human thing possible. The recording ended. Static, silence, absence. Elias sat in his agricultural shed, surrounded by growing things, tears streaming down his face. The sun continued rising, the crops continued growing, the universe continued spinning, but something had changed. Something fundamental. He looked at his right hand, felt the electric warmth, the phantom pressure, her presence encoded in quantum patterns and electromagnetic fields and things science said were impossible, but love made real. He smiled. For the first time in a year, he smiled without it hurting. I'll tell them, he said to the morning air, to the impossible warmth, to the woman who'd taught an empire to feel. I'll tell them what trust costs, what it buys, why it matters. I'll tell them your story, our story, the story of how a human and a Thal'ari proved that choosing each other is the most dangerous thing in the universe. His tablet chirped again. New message. From High Counselor Thalen, just 3 lines. My daughter taught me to feel. It is agonizing. It is beautiful. Thank you for showing her it was possible. I am learning too. Slowly. But I am learning. Humans cannot be trusted. Thank God. Elias read it twice, then stood, walked into the field, raised his right hand to the artificial sun, felt the warmth that shouldn't exist, felt Lyra's impossible presence, felt trust persisting beyond death, beyond logic, beyond every rule that said it should end. And somewhere in the space between them, in the electromagnetic patterns that never quite faded, in the quantum entanglement of 2 souls who'd chosen each other against empires, Lyra Thalen smiled. Because trust, once given, never really dies. It echoes, it spreads, it teaches, it transforms, It endures. And that, in the end, is what makes humanity so dangerous. Not weapons, not technology, not even rebellion. Just the stubborn, impossible revolutionary act of trusting someone the universe says you shouldn't. Of holding hands when soldiers arrive. Of choosing to feel in an empire that calls feeling weakness. Of loving despite cost. Of persisting despite pain. Of believing despite evidence. Of being human, even when humanity is called contamination. Humans cannot be trusted to abandon that. Cannot be trusted to learn better. Cannot be trusted to stop making trust contagious. And thank God, thank every impossible, beautiful, dangerous God that might exist. Thank God for that unteachable, incurable, revolutionary human tendency to trust anyway, to care anyway, to love anyway, to hold on anyway, to believe anyway, to persist anyway, because in the end, that is what changes empires. That is what transforms galaxies. That is what makes the universe remember. Not force, not conquest, not even sacrifice. Just two people, holding hands in defiance of everything that says they shouldn't. Just one human teaching one Thalari that trust is stronger than doctrine. Just one impossible choice reverberating through space and time and hearts until it becomes inevitable. Until trust becomes tradition. Until feeling becomes strength, until humanity becomes universal, until the day when no one remembers why holding hands was ever called treason. And on that day, somewhere in the patterns that connect all consciousness, Lyra and Elias will still be there, still holding on, still choosing, still trusting, still teaching the universe what love means when love is brave enough to cost everything, still proving that humans cannot be trusted, because thank God, they trust anyway. Elias and Lyra's story reveals a simple yet profound truth about the human condition. We choose to trust, even when everything tells us not to. In a universe where logic rules, humanity stands out by its willingness to defy the cold certainty of survival in favor of the warmth of connection. What makes us human isn't just our ability to survive. It's our ability to feel, to choose each other, even at the highest cost. It's a vulnerability that, paradoxically, becomes our greatest strength. In the end, the greatest revolution is not fought with weapons, but with trust, and though the Empire may try to break us, there's something indomitable about the human heart. It chooses to believe, despite evidence. It chooses to trust, despite logic. And that is the most dangerous weapon the universe has yet to face. As you reflect on Lyra and Elias's choices, ask yourself, what is the cost of trust in a world that demands control over compassion? Can we ever truly abandon the idea of choosing love and connection when society tells us it's foolish? How much are you willing to sacrifice to stay true to what you believe? The real question is, after hearing this story, can you trust someone even when the universe tells you not to? If this story resonated with you, let's continue this conversation. Comment with the word revolution to show you're ready to embrace the impossible choice to trust, no matter the cost. Share where you're watching from and what this story made you think about. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to get notified about our next video, because this story, like all great revolutions, needs to be shared. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.